All right, guys, today we're going to be doing a percents review. This is actually what we're going to be doing all week. So I can prove proficiency related to performing operations with percents. Percents is something that you're going to be using a lot, especially if you're dealing with money in any context. Think sales tax, discounts, things like that. So very useful in the real world, and hopefully this will be something that you guys will be able to pick up pretty quick. I don't think you're going to have any problems. And again, there's some similarity between fractions, decimals, and percents, which is actually going to be one of your lessons. So we will look at that as well. One of the first things that we can talk about and that you'll need to know is called the percent proportion. Okay, and so let's just kind of proportion is always made up of a fraction equals a fraction. A proportion really, as a matter of fact, of just equivalent fractions. And so the percent proportion is kind of like this. It is the word is and the word of. We'll explain what all that means here in just a second. On this side, you have percent. On this side, you have 100. Okay. So this always relates to the part of something, and this always relates to the whole. One of the other things we have to understand about percent is always based on 100. Okay, so if somebody says, "Hey, I'm giving 100% effort," okay, and that kind of makes sense. They're giving full effort, right? So percents are always based on 100. So that number is going to be there all the time. The percent is always going to be there, and then is and of are just kind of keywords to help us kind of understand what to do with each problem. So let's just dive right in. I think this is going to be the best way. And this is related to the first lesson that you have, which is Intro to Percents. And so an example of a problem may be, number one, we'll call it what percent of 6 is 3.36. Okay, so what percent of 6 is 3.36? Well, let's think about the words that we have here. Okay, it's asking what percent. So that is kind of the thing we're looking for. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put an X right here where percent is. Again, I'm just putting my unknown value exactly where it is on my proportion. Okay, and then it says what percent of 6. So of 6. Notice this key word here, of 6. So 6 would be my total that I'm talking about, or the whole that I'm talking about. Okay, so total or whole. So that means the 6 would need to go right here. And then you notice it says is 3.36. So this is 3.36 would need to go right here. Okay, so again, all we're doing is we're just using these key words, for example, is, to help us to know, okay, this needs to go in the is spot. And conversely, we're using this keyword of, okay, to tell me that this 6 needs to go in this spot here. So it's kind of just helping me to know where to go. And then obviously the last part is this 100 that is always going to be there. That's going to be a constant that's going to be there all the time. So then you ask, well, how do we solve proportions? Well, you solve proportions by cross multiplying and dividing, okay? So remember, cross multiplying and dividing. You've been doing this probably a long time. So we have 3.36 times 100 equals 6 times x, okay? So again, at this point, we would just take 3.36 times 100. There's something interesting here that we need to note. When I multiply by 100, think about this. I'm really multiplying by 1, but I'm also multiplying by these two zeros as well. So anytime I multiply by 100, really all that happens is my decimal moves over 2 places, okay? So instead of 3.36, this would be 336, okay, equals 6x. And then all I have to do at this point is just divide by 6. And so my final answer here for what percent of 6 is 3.36 is x equals 56%. Okay. So again, if I were to take 6 times 56%, it should give me 3.36, and it will. Okay. So again, you can use the Desmos calculator to help you to do the math. But again, these are kind of things that we kind of have to set up. So let's talk about number 2. Number 2 says, what is 45% of 40? So what is 45% of 40? So again, let's think about our proportion is of equals X over 100, or I'm sorry, percent over 100. Let me change that so that we know what needs to go where. So there's my percentage. I just repeated it from up above. So let's think about where things need to go. Obviously, what is 45%? So is what I'm looking for. 45%, I know that would need to go right here, right? That needs to go right there. So I'm going to go ahead and just create my proportion. And I know that 45 needs to go there. I know that 100 always goes here. And now it says notice of 40. So of 40, the of is the denominator in my first proportion, or it's my whole number. So then really what I'm looking for is X. It's is, what is, right? So again, same exact process. We're just going to cross multiply and then divide. So X times 100 is 100X, and that is equal to 40 times 45, which I believe is 1,800. And again, we could use our calculator to do that. I can't do that in my head either. I'd have to get a calculator. Okay. Then in order to get X by itself, I'm going to need to divide by 100, which means that X has to equal 18. So what is 45% of 40? 18. Okay. Last but not least on this particular section is you'll be given things like this. I'm going to try my best to draw this as best I can. Okay, and let's see. Okay, and so what they may do with this type of problem is they will have all those boxes, let's say, shaded. And they're going to ask you, what percent is that? Well, again, all I have to do with this case is just count how many total boxes I have, because percent is always based on the part over the whole, right? So how many total boxes do I have? Well, if I look here, I've actually got 20 boxes, okay? 20 total. How many of those 20 total are colored blue? Well, if I count those boxes again, I'm going to figure out that I have 10 of those that are counted blue. So let me think about that as a simplified fraction. Well, if 10 is half of 20, so 10 over 20 is really the same thing as 1/2. And let's think about what a half of a dollar is. Well, half of a dollar is 50 cents. Well, how do you write 50 cents? It's 0.50, right? But again, let's think about the fact that this is based on 100. So I want to give you a little practice as well about how do we say this actual number right here? Well, we usually say something like 0.50, but that's not actually what it is. You notice this is my tenths place. We already kind of went over place value. This is my hundredths place. So this is actually the same as 50 over 100, okay? So again, percentages are based on 100, so that means that if it's 50 over 100, this must represent 50%. Now there's another way we could do that as well. When you're converting from decimals to percents, it's the same thing as multiplying by 100. So again, if I multiply by 100, I'm going to move my decimal place 2 places to the right, okay? So again, I would take my decimal place here. If I'm converting from a decimal to a percent, and I'm just going to move it 2 places. So my decimal's actually right there. So again, 0.50 is the same thing as 50 out of 100, which is the same thing as 50%. Okay, so that's all you're going to have to do on those. So now let's move to our second part, which is real world percents. And this is probably something we don't like as good, but it really is applicable, something that we need to make sure that we understand. So let's say number one is car sales for $7,995. It's definitely a used car. You couldn't get a new car for that before tax. Okay, so you have 4% in registration fees, and you have property tax. Believe it or not, there is property tax on vehicles. Property tax of 3%. And so the question is, how much are you as a buyer going to pay in taxes? Well, again, you're going to pay 4% in regular fees and you're going to pay 3% in property tax. So I could add those two percentages together, which gives me 7%. So again, I'm going to take this sales price of $79.95 before tax, and I'm going to have to multiply that times this 7% in order to figure out how much that's going to be. So again, $79.95 times 7%. Now, how do I write that as a decimal? Remember that my decimal is already right here at the end. So when I convert from a percent back to a decimal, I need to move my decimal place back 2 places. Okay? So 7% is the same thing as 0.07 or 7/100ths, which kind of makes sense. Okay? Once I do that math, and again, you can use your calculator to do that, you're going to come up with an answer of $559.65. Okay? All right, let's look at one maybe a little bit more difficult. So number 2, let's say that a CD, I know we don't really use CDs very much as more. A CD sells for $13. So a CD sells for $13, but today and today only, that CD is 10% off. Yet at the same time, I have a sales tax, and believe me, there is sales tax on everything. That is 6%. By the way, Kentucky sales tax is 6%. So now the question is, what is my total price? What's my total price for that CD? Okay, so let's think about this. Number 1, my CD sells for $13 before tax or before anything else. So now I need to take 10% off of that price. So again, what would I do here? I've got to take my $13 and I've got to multiply that times 10%. Again, 10%, you would write that as 0.10. Need to move that decimal back 2 places. And that is going to give me $1.30. Now, what do I have to do with that $1.30? Remember, it's 10% off. So the word off is sort of like taking a discount, right? So now I need to take that $13 and I need to subtract $1.30 because that's how much I'm going to get off of my CD. All right. That is going to give me $11.70. All right. But before we get excited, let's think about the fact that, oh no, yes, I got 10% off, but now I still have to pay sales tax of 6%. Okay. So now I have to take this value of $11.70 and I have to multiply that times 6%. Well, let's practice right now. 6%. My decimal's here. I need to move it back 2 places, which means that I'm actually going to be multiplying by 0.06 or 6/100ths. Okay. That is going to give me 0.702 or 702 thousandths. Okay. Now, what do I have to do with this number? Well, now I have to add that to, because it's sales tax, which means I have to add it to my price. So now I'm going to add that to my price that I had here of $11.70, okay? Which means my total price now is going to come to 12.402. But remember, when we're talking about money, we just round to the second place. So it's going to be $12.40 is going to be my total price. And this would be my final answer for that particular problem, okay? So a little bit more detailed. So you got to think about, if it says 10% off, then I got to think about that being a discount. If it is talking about sales tax or something that's going to be added, then I've got to add that back to my price, okay? So a little bit more detailed on those. And then last but certainly not least, and the bell may catch me here, so if you hear the bell, just don't worry about it. The last part is we're converting fractions to percents. So let's try to do this really quick. So number 1, we have 9/25ths, and we're asked to convert that to a percent. Remember, this is my part and this is my total, so I can actually use my percent proportion to help me here. So the only thing I need over here is x over 100. I can multiply 25 times x and then 9 times 100. divide by 25. I know I'm doing this quick, but you can obviously pause the video and kind of work through these as well. And so x is going to equal 36%. Okay, so if I'm going from a fraction to a percent, this is what I need to do. Okay, so let's look at number 2. Number 2 is from a fraction to a decimal. So fraction from a decimal, let's see how we read this, okay? Some people will just say 7/10, but let's actually think about what this is. This is 7/10. 7/10. So how would I write 7/10 as a decimal? So the way you say it is actually the way you write it, okay? So 7/10 as a decimal would look like this, because this is in the tenths place, and I have a 7 in the tenths place. So 7/10 would be written like this. So again, the way you say this fraction is actually the way you write it as a decimal. Pretty doggone easy, okay? All right, number 3. Let's say we're going from a decimal to a percent, and we've already kind of done some of this already. So if we have 0.001 and we need to turn that into a percent, remember percents are always based on 100. So I could multiply times 100. And when I multiply times 100, really all that happens is I move my decimal 2 places. So my decimal would end up right there. So this number, 0.001, which is 1,000th, is actually the same as 0.1% or 1/10 of a percent. Okay? Last but certainly not least, again, we're trying to go fast just because the bell is going to catch us. Number 4, we're going from percent to fraction. So again, if I start with 22%, let's think about where my decimal is right now. My decimal is always at the end of a number if it's not present. So that means to go to a decimal, we need to move it 2 places. Okay, so this time we're really going from a percent to a decimal to a fraction. So that would be 0.22, but how do I read that? I read that as 22/100ths, okay? So 22/100ths, now I've actually got it in fraction form. Now I just need to simplify it, and if you notice, both of these numbers end with even numbers, which means that these can be divisible by 2. 22 divided by 2 is 11, and 100 divided by 2 is 50. So this would be my final answer that I would have for that one. Again, make sure to go back. If you need to, pause the video, look at these, work through these examples, and these are exactly the kind of things that you're going to see on your practice today. Again, if you need help, make sure to reach out to either me or Miss Wheeler, and we would be glad to help you with any of these problems that you're having issues with. Thank you, guys, and have a great week this week.